evolution as a worldview, as a philosophy of life, caught on in the 1800s, not because there was evidence against creation, but because it was a way to justify the cruelty, the suffering. Carnegie and Rockefeller used the theory of evolution to justify their business practices. Standard Oil became a monopoly. Wipe out the competition any way you have to. If there's 10 gas stations, buy 9 and starve the 10th guy out. And then you got a monopoly. We had to have laws. The unions developed in this time period, late 1800s. The trust busters, the monopolies had to be broken up. The philosophy of evolution was driving some of these people. The strongest survive, tooth and claw, struggle for life. Well, let's be the strongest. Read the biographies of these fellows.
Capitalism is all it is.
Oh, capitalism. The Bible teaches a form of capitalism, but not like we have today. I believe everybody should be able to own their own property and reap the results of their labor. If you don't work, you shouldn't eat. That's God's welfare program. Now, if I make money and I would like to give my money to somebody else, that's my prerogative. But should the government take my money from my labor and give it to somebody who won't labor?
That's what the church did. That's what the early church did.
Yeah, the whole welfare program ought to be the church operating it, or the Christians, or the individuals. This idea, then we're getting into a whole other subject, but the idea of the philosophy of evolution is a motivating factor for the 1800s. You're not going to understand the historical events of the late 1800s and early 1900s unless you understand the philosophy of these people. When a headhunter is taught as a little boy, now Johnny, if you kill your enemy, cut his head off and eat his brains, because then you get his power. There are tribes like that, right? He's going to behave that way because of what he believes. Everybody behaves based on their belief pattern. If you believe, you're going to face God someday. If you believe the Bible is true, and you believe it's wrong to commit adultery, it's wrong to have premarital sex, if you believe the Bible teaches that and it is wrong, then you're more likely to behave that way. So what you believe determines how you behave. And many of the social questions that we argue about today are really back to this argument, creation and evolution. Let's take abortion, for example. Would abortion be right or wrong? Well, before you answer that, if you believe evolution is the way that we got here, you are more likely to say abortion is fine, it's acceptable means of population control or whatever you want. If you believe there's a creator and a God who creates and gives life, then abortion is obviously murder. So the abortion question is really split down the same lines as the creation-evolution question. So is euthanasia, so is mercy killing. The creationist and evolutionist worldviews are philosophies of life. They really undergird your whole thinking process. Your attitude about many things, your reaction to things is based upon your basic philosophy of life, which is going to be one of these two in some form or another. There are a variety of evolutionists. There are some who say God got involved in the process. God snapped his fingers 20 billion years ago, started it. But their philosophy of life would be, I think, considerably different than my philosophy of life, which says the Bible is literally true and to be obeyed, to be read carefully and to be obeyed. Has never been disproven scientifically. Archaeology has never found anything wrong with the Bible. Nobody's ever been able to prove the world is more than 10,000 years old. You can't prove that scientifically. And I think I gave you some scientific evidence that say it can't be billions of years old. If I told you this room was 900 years old, it would be easy to prove I am wrong. Even though probably none of you saw this room getting built, you could prove it was not 900 years old because there's electricity built into the walls. They didn't have electricity till 100 years ago. So you could then falsify what I said, that the world's that this room is 900 years old. That's easy to falsify. I think it's easy to falsify the time element of evolution. I think it is also easy to falsify the idea that life comes from non-life. Ultimately, the evolutionist has to believe in spontaneous generation in some form or another. There is no way out of that corner. You have to believe that dirt became life at some point. And yet it's never been observed. It's been tried in the laboratory. Last time I was here, one of the students said, well, Mr. Hovind, what would you say if scientists could create life in the laboratory? And I said, that would prove it takes intelligence to make life, which is what the creationist has been saying all along. Even if Miller did make life, and he did not, all he made was a few simple amino acids, and he got some right-handed and some left-handed, an equal number of each, and life is all one way, not both ways. And amino acid is a far cry from life. The analogy, the difference between an amino acid that Miller made, one amino acid, the difference between that and life is many, many orders of magnitude. If I drop toothpicks on the floor, I may accidentally form a letter of the alphabet. That is probably, if I dropped 1,000,000 toothpicks, I would probably make a letter A someplace out of that pile, or a letter Z, or a letter N. What are the chances of me dropping toothpicks and developing an entire word? With all the letters?
How many toothpicks and how many times are you going to drop?
Let's drop billions of them, and let's drop them billions of times. Is there a chance I will get a word? Yeah, sure. It's less likely than getting a letter. I'll get a lot of letters, but there's very few words. What's the chances of getting a whole sentence?
We can do an experiment and find out.
We could do that. We could calculate that mathematically. Okay. Now, what's the chances of randomly producing Webster's dictionary? The more complex you get, the less the chance becomes, right? Many folks have calculated the mathematical probability of evolution happening as 0.
Unless on the very simple words, there's a process of natural selection whereby only the simple words reproduce themselves, and the ones that don't create anything don't reproduce and don't survive.
Yeah, but now you got a mysterious outside process acting on it.
It's not mysterious. It's proven. You admitted that natural selection exists.
Oh yeah.
20 minutes ago.
Natural selection exists.
If you dumped all those toothpicks out, and then all the toothpicks dissolved into nothingness, except the only ones that were there in the letters began to reproduce themselves, and so there'd be more letters than there would be non-letters.
Then the words and because we have more letters.
And then the ones that you dropped and created words would reproduce themselves, and so and mutated. So what you're saying is you're talking about complete randomness, and evolution has nothing to do with complete randomness. You're talking about selection, which you admitted was a natural process.
Nature selects. Now you have nature as being the God, capital N. Nature selects.
Which is an internal force of the beings. They die because they are not a letter. That is not because something decided that they must die.
In the analogy, the letters would also dissolve. The thing that Bishop Wilberforce...
So before they dissolve, they would reproduce themselves in roughly the same.
Yeah, how are they going to learn to reproduce themselves? I think you've got a lot of hocus pocus here that's unscientific and unprovable. This initial cell...
Well, the ones that wouldn't reproduce themselves would dissolve.
That's
sure.
Would dissolve. And out of all those toothpicks, you would find one that, I don't know, some toothpick.
But you can understand my analogy that the probability of developing Webster's dictionary or Encyclopedia Britannica is 0. You can drop them toothpicks forever. It's never going to happen. You can choose which one you want to believe. I would say many people choose this precisely because it avoids a creator and accountability.
But there are moral beliefs that are accepted within yourself that aren't because of a creator, and they aren't because you believe that there should be something, a set of moral standards, not because they're imposed.
And I tried to say that. I was accused of, saying everybody's bad who's an evolutionist. I said some people take the evolutionist worldview to a higher plane and say, hey, we're responsible, we better fix this world. That's a good result. There are those who take it to the lower plane, like Hitler and communism and socialism. That's what I meant to say.
There are those who take creation.
And I said that. There are those who take it to a higher plane, and there are the Jim Joneses who take it to a lower plane.
So they are more equal, in probability and in
It looked more like a mirror image to me rather than sort of an inverse.
Well, I would say probability, mathematics would say this didn't happen. There must have been a creator.
It depends on whether you're dealing with finite mathematics or infinite.
Hold it, one at a time. What?
It's either finite. It depends on whether you're dealing with finite mathematics or infinite mathematics.
Because what's the probability that just a being is surviving on an ultimate plane or on a higher plane than we are, that there's just something there that created it. You can't impose mathematics on that. That's why
Right.
you can't.
It's outside the realm of science.
So
Yep.
it's probably a higher